Hey, it's a new world, gotta adapt to it. Innovation, information, more than the average. Rushing, please ignore the interruptions, cause this is digital discussions.
So welcome you guys to what Chloe says is the 11th week of the Leasing Agent Forum. I'm excited to have you guys. And I'm really excited to have our guest speaker today, my dear friend, Jayson Siano. Woo! Give him some love, everyone. Give him some love.
I'm obviously Instagramming this.
Woo!
Smile for the camera.
So I met Jayson. I'm going to tell you the exact date that I met Jayson.
Boy.
I'm not going to tell them what this is.
Okay.
But this is the date that I met you. March 13th, 2017.
Wow.
Are you surprised, right?
You know what? It's funny because if I had to think about it, I would actually think that we've been in each other's lives longer than that, but it's probably because we've spent so much time communicating and collaborating in that amount of time.
And Jayson, so the power of social media. So I attended, so you guys know that I love Gary Vaynerchuk. And I had gone to something that a conference that he put on called Agent 2021, which was down in Miami. I think I asked a question, right? And Jay was in the audience, and I said I'm in commercial real estate because the majority of the attendees at the event that were in real estate were residential. So I got up and asked a question, and I said I'm in commercial real estate. So the next thing I know, I get an email from Jayson saying, hey, I was at Agent 2021. I'm also in commercial real estate, love to chat. And I said, and he goes, I'm in New York. I said, oh, I'm going to go spend the day with Gary and his team in March. So the Agent 2021 thing was in January. I said, I'm going to be in New York in March. Do you want to get together? And he was like, yeah. So we had dinner together. That was, supposed to be like an hour. And I kept delaying it because my thing at Vaynerchuk's kept it kept getting delayed. So we probably met around 8 o'clock. And I think what?
The 4 Ds.
Yeah, the 4 Ds. And we got together and we had like a 3-hour dinner, and we were just blah, 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 like it was a match made in heaven, right, Jay?
Absolutely.
So so Jay reached out, and then from then on, we've been really good friends. I value my friendship and my relationship with Jayson, and he's like a rock star in social media, does a ton of tenant rep. Has done a lot of fitness tenant rep, restaurant tenant rep. And I promised you guys that we would have a day focused on tenant rep, and I couldn't think of anyone better. And I will turn it over to Jayson for a little bit to just tell you a little bit about how he got in the business before I start asking questions. Is that good?
Sure, whatever you want to do. So, nice to meet everybody. I'm happy to be here. Just by a show of hands, who actually knows who I am and follows anything I do on social? Cool. A few of you. Awesome. It's funny because I dedicate a lot of my life and time and energy to developing my personal brand as well as my company. So it's interesting to see how far and wide it actually travels. By the way, if nobody raised their hand, I would still spend the same amount of time and energy on it. So, because I know how that. So I started in the commercial real estate industry just shy of 20 years ago, working for a small boutique retail only company called Breslin Realty in Long Island, New York, where I was born and raised. I like to say that real estate chose me. And what I mean by that is I went to college in Arizona, and my family business was the automobile business. And I basically thought that I would be going into the family business through college. And unfortunately, there was a turn of events. My mother was diagnosed with cancer and ended up, unfortunately, passing right after I graduated college. and my family exited the automobile business, and I was left to figure out what I wanted to do when I grow up. So I was a nightclub promoter, a DJ, always, involved in a little bit of fashion and music, and like I said, the nightlife industry. So when I started to decide that I wanted to pursue a career in real estate, I naturally gravitated to retail and restaurants. When I started in the business, I was given a desk, a phone, a computer. In my interview, I, was talking about how if I put my mind to anything, I could do it really well, and pitching myself really well. And my boss at the time looked at me and said, "You're hired." And I was like, "It's that simple?" He's like, "Well, yeah, you're a 1099 broker, so I don't really give a shit if you do well or not. Hopefully you do." But I was like, really, this is interesting. What an interesting career choice. Long story short, I ended up having an opportunity to pitch the Starbucks account about 2 years into the business. I had done maybe 1 or 2 deals with local tenants, a nail salon deal, a cell phone store deal. I was along for the ride on the Starbucks pitch, and the senior broker who brought me along completely shit the bed in the pitch and choked up, and I had to kind of jump in and say, "If I may," and I had zero credibility, zero track record, but I spoke about the company that I worked for, and got myself at least another opportunity to sit down with Starbucks. Long story short, I ended up landing that account, and still to this day represent Starbucks exclusively. We'll get into that. But on the heels of that, I was visiting friends. I went to college at the University of Arizona, spent a lot of time on the West Coast. I was visiting college friends 2003, 2004 in LA, and I discovered a concept called Chipotle that you guys might have heard of. And I just called them constantly, and ended up bringing Chipotle to New York, designing their expansion strategy, and rolling that out, which was extremely exciting because I was able to work directly with Steve Ells early on in my career. And I'll give you kind of some quick milestones in my career. So from there, I ended up being the top producer at the company that I was at. The larger companies came knocking, and I ended up at the end of 2006, I saw that there was going to be a change in the economy. Things were good too long. We were long on the cycle, and CBRE made me an offer that I couldn't refuse. I actually asked them to double that offer, and I'd consider it. The woman who was pursuing me said, "I'll set up a meeting with you and Marianne Ty." I said, "Let me know when she's available." Went in, told a little bit of this story to Marianne Ty. She approved that deal. And I ended up going to CBRE in January of 2007. However, I left my Starbucks and Chipotle accounts at my previous employer because I believe in not burning bridges, and I thought that that would be helpful in the future. I also know that I'm very good at business development, and I factored that into my deal going to CB. The first week that I was at CB, I called a company called Massage Envy, and they said, "We'll give you the area developer's phone number who owns New York." I called the gentleman, and he said, "You have good timing and bad timing." I said, "Why is that?" He said, "I'm actually touring with your competitor on Monday." This is like a Thursday or a Friday. I said, "When do you get in?" He said, "Sunday morning." I said, "Great, I'll pick you up at the airport." Toured him on Sunday morning. Needless to say, he never made it to that Monday tour. And the nice part about that experience is that from there, I helped Massage Envy and this gentleman design their strategy for the 5 states based on qualified households and exactly how many licenses that they could sell in each territory. Franchise real estate and corporate real estate are very different. We can get into that. But what's nice is the sequence of events that happened as a result of that phone call. About a year and a half after the Massage Envy account and doing really well with them, those folks stumbled upon a concept called European Wax Center, asked me to fly down Florida, Beth's neck of the woods, asked me my thoughts on the concept, loved it. They ended up partnering with the Cobra brothers, and I got involved in European Wax Center from Unit 3. Fast forward about a year and a half after that, I get a call to tour Massage Envy with the same gentleman who was still involved in Massage Envy. He and his wife were touring on a Saturday, and with his children, actually, his whole family. And his wife's telling me, but more him, about a concept called Ellen's Ultimate Workout. And he and I just keep laughing at the name of this concept. And she said, no, Jerome, I told, Ellen about you and that you're in the franchise space and blah, blah, blah. I'm telling you, it's special. Fast forward about probably 8 months after that conversation in the car that I forgot about, Jerome called me and said, Jay, I want you to come down to New York and check out what I've been working on. And I walked into the first Orange Theory Fitness and was involved in Orange Theory from the inception. So those are some interesting milestones from 2001 to 2010. So I could probably fill in the blanks to 2020 at some point, but that's my start.
When did you leave CB and start Sabre?
So I had a 5-year contract with CB that I paid to get out of a year early. So I left at the end of 2010 and turned the lights on at Sabre at the beginning of 11.
And when you started Sabre, how many people?
So it's funny, based on all of the projections I'm doing because of COVID, and obviously our business being off, as a result of that, I've been going back and looking at the history of our gross revenue since 2011, and so I'll tell you a little bit about that story. So when I decided that I wanted to leave CBRE and didn't really think there were any great options for me, because I didn't want to go from a CB to a Cushman, Newmark, JLL, not because I don't tremendously respect those organizations, but they were not necessarily where I saw myself thriving. By the way, like back when I worked at CB, I obviously did not wear short sleeve shirts that showed my tattoos because that was not allowed. And I was getting to a place in my life where I wanted to be able to be myself in business and not have 4 different versions of Jayson Siano like I did while I was at CB. So I ended up actually going back to my boss and mentor, and this is where that never burning bridge story comes in. And I pitched him on the idea of starting a new company, dissolving his business, his brokerage business that had been around for probably 35 years. It was a family business initially, and me leaving CB and us joining forces. And he said, I appreciate that, Jay. But I'm not really interested. I have a good business, and I'm doing what we like to do, and I quite honestly don't really want to work that hard and start something new from scratch. I said, that's great, Kenny. I love you, and we're always going to be friends, but do realize that I represent more tenants than your entire company personally at this point, and I'm not about to shoot some shots across your bow. But I am going to tell you, if my name is on a company versus CBRE, I'm going to work even harder than I do now, and we're going to become competition. So he called me the next day and asked me to sit back down, and we did, and we decided to move forward, and I left CBRE. He dissolved his brokerage company, and we created Sabre, that stands for Siano and Breslin Real Estate.
Awesome. So I don't know where to begin. Why do you like Tenant Rep?
Tenant Rep is the more difficult side of the brokerage business because you don't learn I'll just use an example. On the landlord leasing side, you only really need to learn a 3 or 5 mile radius of your property. On the tenant rep side, you have to be on the fly, ready to answer any question in any market that you're operating in, which is obviously a lot more difficult because today I operate in the entire country. So even when it was a hyper local thing and I was representing Starbucks, I needed to know every single corner and, the traffic counts and why we didn't have an opportunity to take that freestanding bank or that gas station that has been there longer than I'm alive, and be able to speak on the fly to all of those different things from very smart and calculated people that are trying to actually get you to foul up, which was always very nerve-wracking in tenant rep. I also, based on the opportunities that came my way, that's kind of how I cut my teeth, and it's really the only thing that I knew. I also, along the way, as I started to build a company, obviously, that does more than tenant rep, I had to learn more about every other aspect of the business. Tenant rep comes natural to me. It's what I'm passionate about. And especially the fact that, now I work with primarily founders and C-suite executives from established and emerging concepts, and I help them design their rollout strategy for the whole country. In addition to that, I kind of get involved in more than just real estate with them. I get involved in anything that can help them scale their business.
Have you ever had a situation where you had a relationship with a tenant, toured them a bunch of times, and then they decided, oh, we're not going to come to the market, and all that time went for naught?
More often than not, I would say that, that's a unfortunate reality of the tenant rep business. You work for free, it's not really fair. And the reality is that there's so many things that I've done since starting my own company that, I used to hear that's just the way it's done. You don't get a retainer because you get paid solely upon the event that a deal is executed. And, on the leasing side, there's a payout schedule. You have to understand your value. And at a certain point, a certain stage in business, you could be very particular about who you work with. So today we've evolved quite a bit where I don't want to do business with anybody that needs my services. I want to do business with people and companies that I truly believe in, that I want to be a part of. And, I'm fortunate enough to be at a level now that, I can ask for things that many others who don't have the same track record and level of experience, can ask for. And, I'm in the process over the last 4 years, and with our rebrand going from Sabre Real Estate to Sabre Advisors, the whole industry is changing, and our business model needs to change, because I can't afford to run around and spend a year of my time with people who may never transact.
Do you think? Yes, yeah. I mean, I hate this. This is why I stopped doing tenant rep decades ago. Because I don't like to work for free, and I don't like the model of, that the landlord pays the broker, but the fiduciary is with the tenant. It's like the most bizarre. I'd love to meet the person who came up with that, because it's ridiculous.
It is. It's a very, and again, it's like you almost don't question it. You just accept it for what it is. Clearly, I'm not somebody who accepts things for what it is, which is why, again, I kind of felt obligated to pave my own way and, create a company for people who think that there's a different way to do things, not necessarily better or not better, but different. And I, when I started Sabre, I realized shortly thereafter that, there were a lot of other folks who felt the same way that I did.
So now, do you hire newbies that you train?
We have not, yes, but very selectively and only one at a time. We were of the mindset, hire 5 people, keep 1 at one time. And actually a very high level person at Starbucks kind of, gave me that mentality early on. And then I, started to realize that we're not Starbucks. So why am I listening to him? And, we're in a very niche business, and you have to have, it's not for the faint of heart, even in the pre-COVID world, right? So it's a very emotional, unfortunately, it's emotional because a lot of times when you close a deal and you're expecting that money to come in at a certain time, you end up not seeing that money when it's supposed to come in. And the folks that you brought a credit tenant to and agreed to pay you, 4 or 5% of the of the lease term, essentially, you know, then want to start negotiating with you when the payments due. So the best part of that reality is that it weeds out a lot of competition, because a lot of people would never get into a business that has such a long deal cycle. But you know, I think a lot of that is going to change again, you know, because looking at, like, with my clients, I mean, I'm negotiating a lot of new deals currently where they're looking to only pay percentage rent for the first, you know, year or two. What does that mean for our fees, right? So, you know, the whole industry is shifting, and you have to be able to pivot and do things that maybe were not commonplace in the industry even pre-COVID.
So if you had a junior on your team and they came to you and said, okay, I've got someone, I was canvassing for this listing that you have me on, but this guy wants more locations. I want to go tenant rep this guy. What, you know, is your 3 pieces of advice for that broker? Do you say, yeah, go ahead and do it so that he can practice?
No.
You know,
Not anymore, because, you know, the way I look at it is you get one bite at the apple, and we're very team driven at Sabre, which was another thing that was important to me when I started the company. I never liked how competitive people were within the same organization. Competitive is one thing, but rooting for somebody to fail within the same company is one of the biggest issues, in my opinion, with brokerage businesses. So I want to set everybody up for success. So I don't want somebody like myself pitching the Starbucks account, you know, 2 years in after closing a nail salon deal and a cell phone store deal. I had no right pitching the Starbucks account, to be honest. So, you know, I like to set us up for success, and I want my folks, regardless of their experience level and skill set, to make sure that they have the right team together, at least for the discussion. So I would say to that person, you know, I'm available to jump on the call with you, or, you know, let's get somebody else on the team who's available to jump on the call with you.
so if they come in and they say, you know, I've got this guy and he wants me to find locations for him, and you ask him questions like, you know, you're to qualify, and if you don't think that it's a real deal, you would tell them don't do it, or you would advise them to not do it.
Absolutely. You know, time is money, and we all have the same 24 hours in a day. The reality is that you have to allow younger folks at times to hit dead ends. You know, I have a very good gut, obviously, now almost 20 years in, to what has a higher likelihood of being realistic and actually turning a profit. And again, at the company, we're very critical now, where we take on a lot less business as time goes on, and we'd rather work with, you know, again, we have the benefit of working with companies from the top, where from a consulting or, you know, master brokerage perspective, which is where I spend all of my time at this point. So, you know, I'm only working with companies that are looking to open, you know, let's call it 15 to 50 locations nationally a year. So that's where I spend my time. And, but that's not to say that Sabre as a whole spends our time only on those types of projects. So the short answer is yes. In most circumstances, I would cut to the chase and say that's a complete waste of time. Let's not go after that business. But at the same time, I will sometimes allow young people, like I do with my kids, right? If I tell them not to touch something that's hot and they keep going to touch it, I'm going to let them touch it eventually. So he actually learns on his own that he shouldn't be touching the thing that's hot.
So how do you, if you're, you know, we want to grow the next gen, right? The next generation of tenant rep brokers. How does one get into it, right? How does someone who's done the nail salon and done the cell phone store get to sit in front of a Starbucks prematurely, or, you know, get to, you know, go to the next level? Like, what's your recommendation for those people out there that have done the landlord thing and is like, I don't want to do the landlord thing, I really want to do tenant rep? What's your advice?
You need to create a strategy and a plan for the specific types of tenants that you'd like to work with. Before I would even start picking up the phone, I'll go back to when I started in the business. I spent the first 6 months studying my market because, again, I grew up in a car dealership, right? So if I was able to learn the lineup of Toyotas really well at 10 or 11, 12 years old and sell Camrys, Corollas, 4Runners just based on the fact that I had to learn the difference between each vehicle. When I got into commercial real estate, I was like, okay, what am I selling, right? Like if you give me this pen and I believe it's a better pen, I could sell a lot of these pens to everybody on the Zoom call. But if you don't understand what your product is better than the next person, you probably have absolutely, you should really not be reaching out to people telling them that you could do something good for them if you can't, right? So I would say before you're even picking up a phone and pitching a tenant rep account, that you need to know your market cold. So I literally drove every shopping center on Long Island, and I have these, here we go. So I have this stack of index cards. I don't know if you guys can see it, kind of, sort of, maybe not. There we go. So basically on these index cards, I took Hagstrom maps. I don't know if you guys even know what Hagstrom maps are at this point. Hagstrom maps are those big fold up, colorful maps that are basically of the territory that you're working. And I drove to every single grocery anchored shopping center and I wrote on the front of them the real estate location. If you don't know what that means, it means the northeast corner of these streets. And then I drew on the back the exact layout of the shopping center and each tenant that was in the shopping center. And guess what, guys? If you took this deck of index cards right now and read them to me, I could tell you from 19 years ago exactly who were on these cards because I didn't take the shortcut. So the only way to really be good at what you do is to actually put in the work.
Okay, so, I want to tell you, Jay, that this group, all 40 of them, have never heard from anyone on this call the importance of market knowledge.
Okay, yeah.
Like the first 3 classes weren't about them going and doing market studies.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I realized pretty early on was, quite honestly, when I got into the business, the better brokers at the company that I worked for were in the business as long as I was alive at that stage of my life. So when I stopped to think about how I could best prepare for myself to actually compete with them, it was to, at least at a minimum, like I said, spend the time and energy learning the market. And any opportunity that I had to talk to somebody, I sounded intelligent because I'll be honest, I was insecure about the fact that I had very little experience and, was just trying to look and feel as professional as I possibly could. But how could I add value as, somebody in their early 20s to, a client who in most cases was older than me? And that hard work, I like to say that I was never, or more often than not, I wasn't the smartest person in the room, but I was always the hardest working person. So, if you go to work in a restaurant and you decide that you want to buy a restaurant and open a restaurant, if you can't actually do every single position in a restaurant really, 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 really well, when you actually go to open one and the chef calls in sick or the bartender calls in sick or the maitre d' calls in sick and you can't fill in on the fly, you're screwed. So, I've done every single position in real estate, including marketing, and, have built, the company based on those things. And I think that's not entirely necessary unless you're looking to start your own company and grow it. But first and foremost, if you want to be the best broker and make the most deals, you need to be extremely, I call it aggressive patience, right? You need to be extremely aggressive and also very patient at the same time. Because if you're doing things out of desperation, which I've seen a lot of people do, and that's the biggest turnoff to me and most people, you're only looking to transact because it benefits you. If you're actually trying to help people, I like to say money doesn't lead, it follows. So, if you don't have the knowledge, if you don't put in the work to know your market as good, if not better than anybody else, why should you really represent Starbucks when you're up against me? And I'm just saying that in an honest way, right? If whoever's on this Zoom and I are pitching the same account, what's going to give you the upper hand to win that business?
And you, as a master broker now, have been traveling the country looking for rock stars to partner with in different markets, right?
That's exactly right. So I'm very responsible for my clients' network in every territory. So, I actually oftentimes I'm the tenant in a lot of cases, right? So, my clients don't even site tour; they just rely entirely on myself and my team. And when we're touring local markets, is that it's as if I'm the tenant. And same point. Why would I engage a local broker that is not, best in class? There's only like, it's not a popularity contest. I want to know that this person is best in class, and will make the entire team look good.
Have you ever given a shot to someone that might not have been, a rock star in their market, but they impressed you because of their market knowledge or of something that they did? If you came to Miami and you were interviewing 3 or 4 people to partner with to rep an account, do you have any stories where you didn't go with the top guy that everyone said was the guy, and you went with more of a hungrier person?
I'm always rooting for the underdog, and I enjoy helping develop people. So yeah, I'm never gonna go for the best person in the market, because typically they're too busy and too cool to run around and work well on as a team member. So yes, for sure. And I will tell you that social media gets you extra special points in my book, because if you're not, if you think about what it takes to be really good at being a broker, and then you throw on top of it other skill sets like social media, video, other things that show that you're a dynamic individual and you have a personality, and you're not, this complete, this person that has no personality. And people want to do business with people that they want to do business with, so you have to have some sort of personality. I think when I started in the business, I was always afraid to be myself, and over time I realized that being myself was my superpower. And but you have to get to a certain point where you have a track record, you're credible enough that at the end of the day, yeah, somebody might not like my tattoos or the fact that I used a curse, but I'm I'm actually really good at what I do. So if they don't want to work with somebody that's like me, I look at it honestly as their loss. And that's not a cocky, arrogant thing. It's no worries. There's enough to go around. At this stage of my life, I want to work with people that want to work with me. So,
Well, and not to mention when you're tenant repping, you got to be with these people for 8 hours in a day in a car for like 3 days sometimes. You better have a good personality.
exactly. And, that's really it. You gravitate to like-minded people. You rely heavily on, introductions from people. Like if Beth, you called me and said, oh, by the way, you have to meet so-and-so in Dallas, they're amazing, I want you to meet them. That goes such a long way, right? Because of the trust factor I have. And that our business has always been an information business. I don't have all the time in the day to like vet people out across the country in every market for every requirement. So I'm going to rely heavily on my network of trusted folks that can make that, streamline that process for me. And then I have a team of people, obviously, within Sabre who all have their own relationships. And, I have a lot of senior level folks that have been in the business longer than I am. And I rely heavily on them as well.
So when since you are kind of the tenant, right? And you do get site submittals from landlords, what give me an example of a great site submittal package if I was sending it to you for Orange Theory? What would be a great landlord site submittal package?
Well, I don't really look at landlord site submittal packages because we get so many of them that it's just really noisy and it's a complete waste of time. Since we design our strategies, we know where our tenants want to be and why, and we rely heavily on, what we'll call the 1,000% location, right, in a market, and then we kind of discount from there. So using Orange Theory as an example, if we're looking to be in Fort Lauderdale, and we know that based on AI data that we have, geofencing, all different types of tools that we'll use, and then just knowing, wow, this, I was going to say Barry's boot camp, but yeah, whatever. This this market has 2 Barry's boot camps that do substantially higher than the average unit volume. And, we know that it's a market we should be in. We're going to determine exactly where the best location would be for us in that market, based on, a lot of different factors, but ultimately, where is the avatar? Where is, the target audience already that we could basically just plop in front of them as opposed to like them having to come find us, right? So a lot of that is an education process with the tenant. Certain tenants like Orange Theory really understand the value of great real estate and are willing to pay for it. They have a threshold that they could spend. Typically in a suburban market, it's $10,000 a month gross. That's pre-COVID. They can't probably afford that anymore unless they're back at 100% occupancy. It's a whole nother issue. But that is more how we do it. However, every site that comes in, the team that's handling the Orange Theory account in that market will look at every site and get back to the person at a minimum. So to be honest, at this stage of the game, it's a quick, short. You're not getting me to look at a whole lot of information. So you tell me real quickly that these are the 3 reasons you should look at this site for Orange Theory. Top performing Lululemon, anything that makes sense, right? Next to a Chopped that's best in whatever, a Raw Juice, one of my favorite tenants in South Florida. Those types of things are gonna get my attention. And if you, by the way, another great point, if you don't have specific information on a site and why it's actually good for the tenant, don't send it. It actually makes you look bad. If I'm getting an email from anybody on this Zoom and you tell me that you have this 36,000 square foot box for Orange Theory, I'm deleting you from my contacts and you're done to me. So I will never look at a site that you submit because you're an idiot.
Yes. Yes. I hope everyone heard that. That includes email blasts where they say, "Dear Tom," and you send it to Jay.
Absolutely.
And they say, "Dear Tom, is this site good for your client 9 round instead of Orange Theory?" And that happens all the time.
Absolutely. It's, it's the simple stuff that you wouldn't, it's really crazy. And guys, this is why it's so encouraging. I feel like there are so few people in the industry that are really, really amazing at what they do. And that, what I mean by that is, we're in a business that mediocre is fully acceptable. Not to me, but it's acceptable to the majority of the industry, which is not acceptable in most industries, by the way. So even if, I'll be honest, at this stage of my life, if I'm operating at 50%, right, like blindfolded with my arms tied behind my back, I'm better than 75% of the people out there. That's crazy, guys. Like, that is so encouraging. And guess what? Based on the fact that, especially on the tenant rep side of the business, it gets more and more difficult over time. And this is, forget COVID for a second. Let's talk about the fact that no town needs a Gap on every corner, right? A J. Crew, a Barnes and Noble, whatever it is, you don't need one on every corner anymore with the internet, right? Like you guys are waking up every day and you're opening your front door and there's packages. Maybe not in the morning, that would be weird. But you're getting home from work and there's packages on your porch. And that eliminated the need for somebody in your household to go to the store in order to get whatever the hell's in those packages, right? So that's just the natural evolution of what's happening in our industry and with retail in general. That's amazing. That's okay. It just means that it's evolving. It doesn't mean that it's dead. But anybody who approaches the business as if it's 1992 or 2002 or 2012 is irrelevant and is not really truly understanding how to be successful today. And I think that's really the most important thing, because there's so much opportunity now. There's going to be even more opportunity. Why? And I hate to say this, because a lot of people are not going to survive this the same way that a lot of retailers are not going to survive this. If you did not put in the work and differentiate and learn how to use technology, how to use social media, how to use video, and do these things to stand out and rise above the noise and become well known, that's such a major advantage, by the way. I have young people that work at Sabre, they're in the business less than a year and are known by a lot of people in the industry because they have a really cool Instagram. I mean, that's crazy, guys. You know, that's why it's interesting to me to know how many people know of me and do and what I do through the use of social media. It's interesting to me because, I mean, that's free, no less. You know, it's just it's amazing. People who don't understand the value of using social media in our business, I don't know, man. I guess they're allergic to money.
Right. Well, and they're, you know, what I find a lot is their egos are not allowing them to become vulnerable. Right. And you know, I wanted to pivot to social. So you know, it's very important that this group of 37 people, so you know, canvassing with Kara.
Of course I do.
And how do you, and you know her mostly because of her Instagram.
That's
like,
right.
have you ever met her in person?
Yes.
But just once or twice, right? Maybe at Vegas?
Yeah, at Vegas, and more than, you know, more than twice probably, but at conferences. But here's the difference. If I was walking past Kara and she didn't have a social media presence, I would never even stop to think about having a conversation with her. And what's really interesting, guys, is that, you know, there's and Beth knows this really well, it becomes like people who are willing to use social media for some reason are like-minded and like providing value to others without expectation in return. And people like myself gravitate to those type of people. And we have this like underground kind of, you know, group that
Army.
digital army that maybe not so underground anymore, but you know, it's amazing what kind of bond that, you know, that creates for people. And, you know, I've become friendly with Ryan Serhant, and I've watched him. I was with Ryan when he, the day that he launched his vlog, and, you know, his vlog, I think now has more viewership than like Bravo does. You know, so it's amazing. And I've spoken to Ryan quite a bit about using social media, using video, vlogging, things of that nature. And, you know, Ryan, again, we can learn a lot from residential real estate based on how much more innovative they are as a whole, as an industry. And Ryan would always talk about, you know, if you have a brand that resonates with a certain group of people, people who love cats are just going to think of you when they're selling their house, right? That doesn't necessarily apply exactly to what we do. But the difference is that if you guys don't know me through social media and start to follow me on social media now, the next time that you see me with my kids, you're going to think you know me better than you do. So the biggest secret that I have that I'll share with you guys is, at this stage of the fact that I've been putting out a weekly vlog episode every week for 3.5 years and have not missed a week, and a lot of other stuff on top of that, when I walk into a room and I'm either meeting somebody for the first time or pitching the account for something. By the way, guys, pre-COVID, people I've never met before are like going in for a hug, right? So you're trying to compete and differentiate with, if you're pitching this account and we're pitching this account, you're like stumbling to introduce yourself and shake somebody's hand when they're like aggressively trying to hug me, and I'm like, who are you? I've never met you before. And that factor right there is a game changer.
Yeah, and I think that if you're a tenant rep, if you are a tenant looking for a tenant rep broker, whether you are on social, whether that tenant is on social media or not, in the pitch, your explanation that you are, and that you've got, a group and you have access to people, that's got to help a million times over the competition that is not involved in social media whatsoever.
Yeah, I think, again, when you become really comfortable in your own skin, life gets good. You're not really concerned about, you lose like the anxiety of, you become your authentic self. And it's funny because Beth and I spoke 30 minutes before this call to make sure I had the right link. And she's like, okay, do you want me to give you the questions? I'm like, absolutely not. I want this to be a conversation with you guys, that's just fluid, and I think that's when you start to really see the magic happen. If you could truly be yourself, and you'd be amazed, at how people are more attracted to you, and want to get to know you more and actually do business with you as a result of, giving them a glimpse into your life.
So I'm going to go to questions, but while I go start looking at those, we got together, was it February in Fort Lauderdale?
Yes.
And we sat and had coffee and we talked about how the world was about to change. And we both said, we're not sure how it's going to change, but it's going to change in a big way.
Yeah.
And, and you were doing a vlog called Future Proof. So while I'm pulling up the questions, what are your predictions for a year from now and 3 years from now?
Yeah, so a year from now, so as I mentioned, I touched upon it a little earlier. So I'm very I'm paying close attention to cash flow, and my projections as a whole, right? Why? Because not everybody, but a lot of people I think in the industry are far too optimistic about January 21. Okay. We're, in my opinion, in the top of the second inning when it comes to the pandemic. So I think that it's going to be a bumpy road for the next, call it 8 to 12 months, realistically. Now, when I say a bumpy road for a normal person, not a bumpy road for me, because I work harder nights, weekends, and holidays. Most people don't. So in a downturn, that's when I work the hardest, because I know you can get ahead so much faster. So if you watch episode 100 of my vlog, you'll see, I think that was 15 months before the pandemic. And in that vlog, in episode 100, I say that the industry is going to change drastically in the next 12 to 18 months, and the world's going to change, and so on and so forth. And that I said that exactly 15 months before the pandemic hit. Am I a futurist? You know what? I've timed things really well. I walked away from the Starbucks account right when they went into closing 600 stores in 2007, really 8, 9. And I kind of saw this, this interruption coming, an election year, all of these other things that make you think about, things have been so good for so long. Can they go on being this good forever? Did I think that a crazy virus would come along and shut the entire world, for months? No, not necessarily, but I've seen this change coming. I called 2019 lean and mean in 19, and I trimmed all of my fat. I think, Beth, you and I talked about that while that was going on. I think right now it's going to be survival of the slimmest, right? So I think that you need to think about how long you can sustain a downturn and take advantage of, not worrying about going out of business over the next 8 to 12 months.
Well, and certainly because the national tenants are still not traveling. If they get to start traveling in Q1 or Q2, that means that they're not signing leases until summer or fall, which means, you maybe get the first half, but the second half is not until 2022. So definitely tenant rep brokers who are working with national tenants have to be looking out and going, oh my goodness.
Well, it's also, it's unique because, so Sabre, and if you go to our website, you'll see it's divided, right? It's commercial real estate and it's national advisory. So we're very diversified. So we have in New York Metro, we have 3 offices. My Manhattan office is closed. It's game over, right? I'm in that office typically every day. I have no interest in being in that office. So now I'm in the suburbs closer to where I live. And our New Jersey office, I typically spend very little time in. And that business has been majorly impacted. I mean, New York Metro has been on pause, and there have been very few transactions since March when this all started. Honestly, if we didn't have a national advisory business, we'd be in a very different position from a company standpoint, because things haven't slowed down that much in Atlanta, in North Carolina, in Dallas. And, so fortunately we're transacting quite a bit in areas that are less impacted. And listen, I drove my family to Florida in June and spent the month of Florida with family in Florida, coming from complete lockdown in New York, going to Florida and almost as if there was no virus whatsoever, and looking around like, people really? Like, I've been locked in my house for months at this point. You guys are eating out at restaurants without masks. Like, you guys think you actually avoided this whole thing? You wait and see. So, those types of like hot areas changing across the country doesn't put me out of business. But if I was Jayson Siano, the Long Island real estate broker back in 2001 to 2006, honestly, I'd be almost out of business right now.
So a couple questions. Do you use tour books or iPads when you're driving around repping tenants and showing them spaces?
Great question. We typically produce 1 or 2 tour books just to have in the car, because I'm old school and I always had tour books and wrote on them. We're finding more often than not now that we email out a digital tour book. Those hard copy tour books are usually on the floor of the car and they're barely touched.
And when you're using geofencing, are you using Placer AI or something else?
We use a lot of different things. Placer is specific to obviously a property. It's more on the property side. We use a lot of different things. We have a strategic partnership with Locate AI, but we use other things than Locate AI from a geofencing standpoint. But most of our stuff, if they're involved on a tenant account with us, it's through them.
When working with franchisees or franchises, do you work as the face for the referral agent and avoid direct contact between the franchisee and the referral agent?
So don't exactly understand the question, but I'll tell you how we work. So,
Terry, can I jump in? So,
go ahead.
So I'm only licensed here I'm in Atlanta, so I'm only licensed here in Georgia. Have an opportunity to work with people who are franchising across the country. So that's me finding referral agents in whatever city or state and helping them find locations. So my question is, would you, or do you, like, once you find the referral agent, put the direct connect between the referral agent and the franchise, and then maybe collect like some kind of one-time consultant fee? Or would you act as the property manager, or not project manager, between the franchise and the referral agent, so that way you can maintain the standard level of care and manage the process in the project and make it really easy for the franchise? to
Okay,
find.
great question. So the short answer is it completely depends on the requirement. So give me an example of how many units the franchise has currently across the US and how many they're opening a year.
So currently they have about 15. And I think over the next 5 years they're opening, or they would like to open like 100.
Okay, so yeah, so they're early on in their development, which is good. So they probably could use a lot of assistance from somebody who really knows what they're doing. And today, so Sabre operates as a outsourced real estate department, right? So for a company that has 15 units, we typically come in and bolt on to their existing team at no cost, right? So if I don't know if they have a director of real estate. If they have a director of real estate, my answer is going to be different than if they don't have a director of real estate. But the short story is you're going to want to be involved at the highest level that you can and maintain as much control as you can and collect a referral fee, but not just completely pass it off. Stay involved in higher level discussions and collect a referral fee. The more involved you are along the way and the more value that you're going to add, it becomes more than just a referral. It could be a partnership of 50-50, if you're actually writing the LOIs and so on and so forth. So I have a team of salaried people that work under me writing LOIs all day, so based on kind of the process that we've created at Sabre and the scale that we do, we've done 150 deals in 32 states so far this year. So I hope that answers your question.
That's awesome. What someone asked, how do you know that the landlord has the money to pay you?
Beth, you're better off answering. How do you know? You have an ironclad agreement, and we're at a point where we're not messing around anymore. So if somebody doesn't pay us, we put liens on their property. So I don't really care if we think they have money or not. We have an ironclad agreement, and we go after them for every penny.
I love that. How do you get any representation agreements with the tenants signed?
Yeah, so the interesting part is that typically I do not. I work on a handshake because part of my whole spiel is that I don't want to be married to you if you don't want to be married to me. And it's truly how I operate and it's how I feel. If we come into this relationship together in this partnership and we're not each holding up our end of the bargain, I know I'm going to hold up my end of the bargain, right? That's easy for me to control. But a lot of times I can't control a tenant doing what they say they're going to do. So more often than not, at this stage of my life, I'm firing clients. They're not firing me. In some cases, we have signed agreements. If we're spending a lot of money, time, energy, and resources up front, we'll have signed agreements with fees involved because, as I mentioned earlier, this stage of my life, I can't operate for a year doing everything that I explained that I do, and them saying, "Oh, by the way, we went a different direction. We're actually no longer going to do physical stores. We're going online only. Sorry, Jay."
Yeah, that's what I hate about it. But Jay, you mentioned earlier that you're seeing tenants negotiating percentage rent for the first 2 years of the lease. What other trends are you noticing in leases with your clients? Are you trying to get pandemic language?
Yeah, absolutely. Every deal that we've touched since the pandemic started has COVID language in it. Tenants are very sensitive to it, and landlords know it's coming. They're expecting it. If you're negotiating deals right now, especially in, let's call it New York, right, where it's been majorly impacted and a lot of businesses are still not open for business, right? So I had a meeting with a tenant today who said, look, we want to expand opportunistically in New York right now. We don't need to wait. We just don't want to start paying rent. So, that's everybody knows that we're going to be on the other side of this at a certain time, right? It's the bridge to the vaccine at this point. So everybody's guess on when that occurs is going to be is different. And by the way, like somebody who's willing to kind of do that now in a calculated risk way fashion, I think landlords are going to be willing to work with them, especially if they're excited about the concept. So it's a partnership thing. Clearly, there's going to be more free rent and concessions for good tenants today. The biggest challenge is, if there is a percentage rent component to the deal out of the gate, which a lot of, like Solid Core, who I represent nationally, is one of the few corporate boutique fitness concepts that is active right now. But they're only doing deals that they can get, free rent on for the first 2 years, plus 250,000 in TI, plus, so not every landlord's going to even want to consider their deal. And they know that because they don't need every landlord to consider it.
So how many spaces or options do you provide to your tenants in a given tour? I love that question.
Yeah.
So let's say Aventura. Now I know you're saying, well, we picked the 1,000% location. That's where we want to be, but it's not available. It's a bank. You've called the bank. They're not moving out. So now what?
Yeah, so at this stage of the game, again, every single assignment that I'm on, I operate as if I'm the CEO of that company, right? So that should help answer your question. I'm showing them as many sites as I believe they should see. I want to understand what works really, really well for the tenant, right? So I need as much information as possible to do my job well, right? The same way that a financial advisor would need as much information to do their job well. So once I understand what's working really well, I will come up with my own concept of ideas that I believe will help the company. And it might be aligned with everything they told me. It might be partially aligned with everything they told me. And it might be very different than what they told me. I mean, more often than not, a potential client or a client will say, Jay, we want to expand in New York, Chicago, Miami, LA, and Dallas. And I'll say, why? Tell me about why you came up with that strategy. And as we start talking through it, I'm going to say, first off, you don't want to go to Dallas and LA. You have X amount of units, and operating from your units in New York and Chicago, it's going to be way more challenging to operate in LA right now. Like, why would you do that to yourself? And all of a sudden they're like, you're right. Like, you actually, maybe we shouldn't go to, so I never take anything at face value. So I will show as many opportunities as I think they should see. But I'm not showing them things for the sake of showing it to them if I don't think it's good. But I also won't make that decision on my own. So if it's something that I think they might think is good, I'll show it to them. We make the decision as a group. If it is a huge success, awesome. We made that decision as a group. If it's a huge failure, terrible. We made that decision as a group.
I remember we did the rollout of Pollo Tropical in Detroit, Orlando, Atlanta, and I want to say New Orleans, somewhere around there. And we did, they had about 15 open in South Florida. So we really studied those 15 to figure out what were the things that made the top 5 the top 5 sales stores, the top performing stores hum, right? And the top 2 things were traffic counts and going home side of the street.
Yeah.
Those were the top 2. It didn't matter. It really didn't matter the daytime pop. It really didn't matter the demographics, all this other stuff that the client thought it was. If we followed the going home and the traffic count, that was the 2 things. And when we got hired, that's not what the CEO thought.
So that's a direct correlation to the high volume locations. Do they have drive-throughs?
Yeah.
There you go. Not surprising, right? So what percentage of the meals are going out the drive-through window? And the minute that you're focusing on drive-through business, it's all about traffic, access, visibility, things of that nature, right?
Yeah. I love this. Don't say no for the price. I can see it over your shoulder over there.
Yes, of course he can.
Don't say no for the prospect.
I know
You
that.
always have to represent your squad.
I know Jace loves that. Your
He
son.
does. Oh man, when he visits me in this office, he presses this a lot more times than are allowable. Put it that way.
All right, I will let one of you jump on and unmute yourself and ask Jay the last question. Whoever can do it fast enough.
Jason, I understand that with Starbucks, of course, you used to, in your particular area, go through each and every shopping center, and I bet you there you must be also trying to see and meet all the tenants in those shopping centers. But Starbucks was different. Shopping centers was not important. It would be freestanding buildings, whether regular freestanding buildings or gas stations or whatever it is. So how did you do that? Because the area, a radius area would have been 2 miles or 3 miles as far as your site selection is concerned. So how did you do that?
Yeah, so don't take everything I say at face value. So what I did in order to get myself up to speed to feel confident that I knew my market when I started in the industry, I do that every single time for every single requirement that I may or may not have. So what do you think I did? I didn't tell the whole story on Starbucks, but the first pitch meeting that I was invited to, the person who invited me totally failed in that meeting. I got an opportunity to go back into that meeting. At the time, there were 87 stores in my trade area. I visited all 87 of them before my next meeting. So that's one thing. So, you know, I'm never going to show up to something unless I am as prepared as I could possibly be. What else did I do? I took a picture of everyone and I tried to catalog. So I had now in my mind, when I thought about the one in XYZ town, I had a photo of it because don't forget, I couldn't just Google it then. It wasn't the same way that we could do it now. So that's one thing. And then from there, you know, you have to realize with a client like Starbucks, there's no such thing as a trade area that's tied to mile radius, right? It's all polygons. So part of my job was to define all of the trade areas in my entire market and tell them why I thought we can go from 87 locations to 142 locations based on the population density and getting down from one store to every 50,000 people to one store to every 27,000 because 7-Eleven was already at one store per every 9,000 and Dunkin' was at one store, right? So there you go.
So my last question before I, thank you profusely. So there's a lot of people on this call that dabble. They are doing the nail in the cell. So, and it's going to be a tough road, I think, for tenant rep brokers over the next year or two. But if they're committed to tenant rep, your 3 pieces of advice for them, if they don't have a guy to go into a pitch meeting with Starbucks.
I'm going to be brutally honest because wasted time is almost as bad as wasted talent. So in these times, it's going to be very tough to be successful as a tenant rep broker if you're not already successful as a tenant rep broker. So what I'll say to you is that even if you want to ultimately be an amazing tenant rep broker, it might not necessarily be the best path for you right now, because ultimately the next 24, 36 months are going to be, again, coming out of the COVID cloud, right? So you're probably better off getting the best opportunity to work with the smartest person that you could possibly find that's really good at retail real estate. I'm assuming we're all talking about retail real estate. It doesn't matter if they're the best tenant rep person, because learning from somebody who's really, really good at their craft, you're going to be able to take that and ultimately customize that to what you want to do down the road, so to speak. So I think there's a lot of very good opportunities at great companies to join a team and learn as much as you possibly can over the next 36 months. That would be, that's what what I would do. So based on Beth's question, my answer is, if I was the person that was on the other end watching me talk on this screen, I would want to hear, the honest answer. And I think the truth is that you're better off finding a secure role that you can learn in and earn while you're learning, whether it's working for a landlord, a developer, whatever it is. Find the best possible situation for yourself to learn as much as possible while generating income for the next 36 months.
Well, right. And
that
what
might
I've
not
shared,
be being a tenant rep broker with no experience.
right. And I've shared with them is we're going to have double the vacancy. So that's where, go lease space.
Landlords are going to be like really, really looking for hardworking people to lease their space, right? So I think, and I have friends at these big REITs that are gearing up to hire to fill their space, right? That's really interesting because, but I will tell you, like, at the end of the day, you have to have the grit and determination that matches up to your ambitions, right? So listen, Beth, you and I both love Gary, right? It's all about self-awareness. You can't have these unrealistic expectations of what you want to be at the peak of your career if you're not willing to put in the work for the next 20 years like myself, right? I've been through, 9/11, 2008, and now this. This is very different than those events. It's, in most people's minds, way worse. It's way more compounded. In my mind, it's way better because it's going to weed out the competition. The worst times in our industry is when all of the general practitioners that do this and do that and do this and do that come into the industry because it's a high time and it's easy to make a deal. It kind of inflates the industry as a whole, and it takes away from the specialists that are really, really, really good at what they do. So I think you just need to be honest with yourself. We're in an industry where you do not have to be a rocket scientist, people. I am not the sharpest tool in the shed. I am, again, one of the hardest working people you'll ever meet on the planet. And that's why I'm successful, because I work really, really hard every single day with realistic expectations of what it takes to achieve the goals that I have. And guess what? Some days I don't want to get out of bed, and I have to, be responsible for not only myself eating, but, the 35 people that I manage, that I brought into the company. I need to make sure they're eating, right? So there's a lot of stress that goes into it. And it's not always fun, but here's the thing. I have a never give up mentality. So, when I started the company, I spent that $868,000 in 1 year. And a lot of people would never have gotten out of that, to be honest. But I did it because I knew failure wasn't an option. Looking back at it, like, would I have spent that same amount of money and gone into the hole that much in 1 year? No. But guess what? I spent $658,000 the next year. So I still spent way more money than I probably should have, that a sane person with a normal work schedule, would spend, right? So I think right now there's more opportunity than ever in our industry, but it's not easy, and our industry is not easy. If you're looking for an easy industry to make a lot of money, you're in the wrong business. But if you're looking for an amazing opportunity that, if you're willing to work really, really, really hard and provide value to the companies and the people that you represent, you're going to make a lot of money.
Awesome. Jayson, my love, thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it. Can we show up some love, everybody?
Thank you, guys.
Thank
It's
you,
been
Jayson.
a pleasure. Thank you so
I
much.
love you.
And follow me on Instagram so I can follow you guys. Love you, Beth. Thanks for everything.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care, guys. Be well.
Cause this is digital discussions.